The winding road had narrowed, shedding its asphalt skin for a rougher gravel path that crunched under the tires of the hired car. Ilara leaned her head against the cool glass, watching the ancient oaks, heavy with moss and shadow, press in from either side. The air, even through the sealed window, carried the scent of damp earth, pine needles, and something wilder, untamed. She was leaving the city far behind, leaving behind the precise order of her life, the meticulously indexed archives, the predictable rhythm of her days. Ahead, the driver announced in a gravelly voice, "Blackwood Manor, ma'am." The car turned a final sweeping bend and the forest parted, revealing a sight that stole Ilara's breath. Blackwood Manor was less a house, and more a fortress of forgotten time. Built of dark local stone, it rose majestically against a bruised twilight sky, its turrets and gables silhouetted like a fairy tale castle. Ivy, thick and ancient, clung to its walls, tracing intricate patterns around leaded windows that gleamed with the last vestiges of daylight. A faint wisp of smoke curled from one of its many chimneys, a silent invitation into its depths. This was her destination for the next 6 months. To catalogue and preserve the private collection of a reclusive patron, an undertaking that promised both intellectual challenge and the solace of solitude. Yet, as she stepped out of the car, the silence of the place felt less like solace and more like an expectant hush. The gravel crunched under her sensible boots, a surprisingly loud sound in the profound quiet. The air was cool, crisp, carrying a hint of distant sea salt and the sweet decay of autumn leaves. A heavy oak door, studded with iron, swung open before she could even reach for the knocker. A man stood framed in the flickering lamplight of the hall, a figure that instantly commanded attention. He was tall, his silhouette broad-shouldered and lean. His dark hair, almost black, fell slightly over a high forehead, and his eyes, even in the dim light, seemed to pierce the twilight, holding an intensity that made Ilara's own breath catch. He wasn't dressed in the stiff uniform of a butler, but in a tailored dark suit that hinted at understated elegance and expensive fabric. "Miss Vance, I presume?" His voice was a low baritone, smooth as aged whiskey, with a faint, almost imperceptible accent she couldn't quite place. It resonated through the quiet hall, sending an unexpected shiver down Ilara's spine. "Yes," she managed, finding her voice. "Ilara Vance. And you must be." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, a flush of white in the encroaching gloom. "Julian Thorne, your host, and the owner of Blackwood Manor. Welcome." He extended a hand, and Ilara's fingers, cold from the journey, met his. His grip was firm, warm, and surprisingly gentle. A jolt, like static electricity, passed between them, subtle but undeniable. She pulled her hand back, perhaps a fraction too quickly, feeling a blush creep up her neck. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne. It's quite a place." She gestured vaguely at the imposing facade, trying to regain her professional composure. "Indeed it is, and it holds quite a history. Please come in. It's rather chilly out here." He stepped aside, allowing her to enter. The grand hall was a symphony of dark wood, ancestral portraits, and the scent of beeswax and old paper. A vast fireplace, large enough to stand in, crackled merrily, casting dancing shadows on the high vaulted ceiling. Julian Thorne moved with a quiet grace, closing the heavy door with a soft thud that sealed them within the manor's embrace. "Your luggage will be brought up shortly. Allow me to show you to your quarters." He led her through a labyrinth of dimly lit corridors, past tapestries depicting forgotten hunts and suits of armor, standing silent guard. Each step echoed softly, emphasizing the manor's profound quietude. Ilara found herself stealing glances at him. His profile was sharp, aristocratic, a strong jawline softened by the curve of his lips. He exuded an aura of contained power, a stillness that was more potent than any overt display. There was a subtle fragrance about him, sandalwood, and a hint of something metallic, like rain on stone. Her room was, in a word, magnificent. High ceilings, a four-poster bed draped in heavy velvet, a roaring fire and a stone hearth. A tall window offered a glimpse of the moon, now a sliver of silver, peeking through the ancient trees. I trust this will be to your liking, Julian said, his voice softer now, almost intimate in the confines of the room. It's perfect, Elara breathed, stepping further in, running a hand over the cool, smooth wood of a nearby dresser. Thank you. Dinner will be served in an hour. Please, make yourself comfortable. He paused at the door, his gaze lingering on her for a moment, longer than necessary. If you require anything at all, please do not hesitate to ask. Then he was gone, leaving Elara in the sudden, echoing silence of the room. She stood there for a long moment, the warmth of the fire on her face, the lingering sensation of his hand on hers. This was not the reclusive, elderly patron she had envisioned. This was Julian Thorne, a man whose presence felt like a whisper of something potent and unexpected. The next morning dawned with a soft ethereal mist clinging to the ancient trees outside her window. After a breakfast of strong coffee and freshly baked bread served in a sun-drenched breakfast nook, Julian led her to the library, the true heart of her mission. It was a cavernous space, 2 stories high, lined floor to ceiling with books. The air was thick with the rich, intoxicating scent of old paper, leather, and dust motes dancing in the shafts of light that streamed through the tall, arched windows. A spiraling iron staircase led to the upper gallery, promising even more literary treasures. This, Miss Vance, is where you will be spending most of your time, Julian announced, his voice imbued with a quiet reverence for the space. He gestured around with an open hand, a possessive pride in his stance. Elara felt a thrill of professional excitement, mixed with a more unsettling awareness of his proximity. He stood close enough that she could feel the faint warmth radiating from him, could catch the subtle scent that was uniquely his. It's extraordinary, she murmured, her gaze sweeping over the spines, recognizing names and editions that made her archivist's heart sing. Truly extraordinary. Indeed. My family has been collecting for generations. Every volume tells a story, not just of its content, but of its journey through time, through the hands that have held it. He moved to a shelf, his long fingers tracing the gilded lettering on an ancient tome. Your task, as I understand it, is to bring order to this collection, to categorize, to preserve, to reveal its hidden gems. That is correct, Elara replied, trying to keep her tone purely professional. My agency specializes in historical preservation. We'll assess the condition, identify rare editions, and create a comprehensive digital catalog. What? Excellent. He turned to face her fully, his eyes, the color of dark amber in the sunlight, holding hers. I trust you will find everything you need. If any volume is too high or too heavy, please do not hesitate to ask for assistance. I'm often nearby. His gaze lingered, a silent question in its depths, a suggestion that went beyond mere practical assistance. Elara felt a flush rise again. I will. Thank you. The days that followed settled into a rhythm. Elara spent her mornings and afternoons immersed in the library, the quiet turning of pages and the soft scratching of her pen. The only sounds. She discovered first editions, forgotten letters tucked between leaves, marginalia in elegant, antique script. It was a scholar's dream. Julian was a constant if often unseen presence. He would appear silently, sometimes to bring her a cup of tea, sometimes to offer a rare biscuit, or simply to stand at the edge of the room, observing her work, a book held casually in his hand. Their conversations were always brief, always intellectual, discussions of literature, history, philosophy. Yet beneath the surface of polite discourse, Elara felt a subtle current, an unspoken tension that grew with each passing day. One afternoon, she was struggling with a particularly heavy folio, perched precariously on a rolling ladder. Her fingers slipped, and the massive book teetered. Before she could gasp, Julian was there, his hand steadying the spine, his other hand firmly grasping the ladder, preventing a nasty fall. His arm brushed against her leg as he reached, and the contact, though fleeting, sent a startling warmth through her. She looked down to find his face just inches from her knee, his dark hair gleaming. His eyes, when they met hers, held a spark, a shared moment of near disaster and quiet rescue. "Careful, Miss Vance," he murmured, his voice a low rumble. "These old books can be treacherous." "Thank you, Mr. Thorne," she managed, her voice a little breathless. "You have excellent reflexes." He straightened up, and the ladder became steady once more. He didn't move away immediately, though. He stood beside her, his presence warm and solid. "Perhaps it is best if I assist you with the higher shelves for the heavier volumes," he suggested, his gaze still on her. "That would be very helpful," she agreed, her heart beating a little faster. It was a practical suggestion, yet the way he said it, the intimacy of the shared space, made it feel like something more. That evening, a storm rolled in from the coast, lashing rain against the windows and howling through the ancient chimneys. The manor, usually so quiet, now hummed with the symphony of the tempest. Julian had suggested dinner in the smaller, more intimate dining room, warmed by another grand fireplace. The table was set for two, with flickering candles casting a warm glow on the polished wood and crystal. He poured her a glass of deep red wine, the ruby liquid swirling enticingly. "A fitting night for tales of old," Julian remarked, his eyes reflecting the candlelight. "The manor always seems to come alive in a storm." Elara took a sip of the rich wine, feeling its warmth spread through her. "It certainly has a voice tonight. I can almost hear the whispers of its past." He smiled, a genuine, open smile that softened the usual intensity of his features. An apt observation. Blackwood is full of whispers. Of joy. Of sorrow. Of secrets. His gaze deepened, resting on her. And sometimes, of desires. The last word hung in the air, a silken thread drawn between them. Elara felt a blush creep up her cheeks again, but this time it was not entirely from embarrassment. It was from a sudden, sharp awareness of the desire that had begun to stir within her, a desire for this enigmatic man across the table. They spoke of many things over dinner: art, philosophy, travel. Elara found herself opening up, sharing her thoughts and passions with an ease that surprised her. Julian was an attentive listener, his eyes never leaving hers, his occasional questions insightful and probing. He seemed to see past her professional facade, past the meticulous archivist, to something deeper within her. The storm outside raged, but inside, the atmosphere was one of growing warmth and intimacy. The wine flowed, and with each glass, the boundaries between them seemed to soften, to blur. "Tell me, Elara," he began, using her first name for the first time, making it sound like a secret, a soft caress. "What truly brings you to Blackwood? Is it merely the books, or do you seek something more?" Her heart skipped a beat. She met his gaze across the flickering candlelight. "The books are certainly a draw, but perhaps I was seeking a different kind of quiet, a place where the outside world couldn't quite reach." He nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. "A sanctuary, then. This place can be that. But sometimes, a sanctuary can also reveal truths we hadn't anticipated." He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a near whisper, almost drowned out by a particularly fierce gust of wind rattling the windows. "Truths about ourselves. About what we truly long for." His words resonated deep within her, echoing the unspoken longings that had been stirring since her arrival. The air in the room seemed to thicken, charged with a palpable current. Her gaze dropped to his lips, then back to his eyes, searching for an answer to the question she hadn't dared to ask. As the storm began to subside, leaving only the rhythmic drip of water from the eaves, Julian suggested they move to the drawing room for a digestive. A fire blazed there too, casting a warm, inviting glow on plush armchairs and a grand piano. He poured her a small glass of amber liquid, its scent a complex blend of herbs and spices. "Armagnac," he explained. "A particular favorite of my grandfather's." They settled into facing armchairs, the firelight dancing across their faces. The silence now was comfortable, filled with the warmth of the brandy and the lingering echoes of their conversation. Elara felt a delicious languor settle over her, a sense of being utterly present in this moment, in this house, with this man. Julian watched her, a faint, knowing smile playing on his lips. "You seem content, Elara." "I am," she admitted, surprised by the honesty in her voice. "More than I expected to be." He reached out, his hand resting on the armrest between them, just inches from hers. Good. My hope was that Blackwood would offer more than just a place of work. His gaze was intense, unwavering, a silent invitation. Perhaps a place of discovery. Ilara's breath hitched. Her fingers tingled, drawn to the warmth of his hand. The air crackled, not with the storm, but with an electric tension that was almost unbearable. She felt a magnetic pull, an undeniable urge to bridge the small gap between them, to feel the warmth of his skin against hers. He watched her, his eyes dark and fathomless, as if reading the swirling desires within her. The corners of his lips quirked upward, a silent challenge, a promise. The fire crackled, the only sound in the room, mirroring the heat that was rapidly building within Ilara. She knew, with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified her, that the whispers of Blackwood Manor were only just beginning to reveal their true meaning. And Julian Thorne was at the heart of every one of them. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken longing, heavy with the weight of his gaze. Ilara's breath hitched, a small involuntary sound lost in the crackle and hiss of the ancient logs. Julian's eyes, those fathomless depths, felt like a physical weight, pressing against her, drawing her deeper into the vortex he created. The air around them seemed to thicken, charged with an invisible energy, a current that hummed between their bodies. Her skin tingled where his hand had briefly rested, a phantom warmth that spread like wildfire beneath her clothes, a blush that she felt bloom across her cheeks and down her throat. Every instinct screamed at her to move, to speak, to break the potent spell that had fallen over them. Her professional facade, the carefully constructed wall of logic and reason she presented to the world, felt brittle, already splintering under the intensity of his presence. Logic felt like a distant, irrelevant concept, shattering under the raw, undeniable force of his magnetic allure. His challenge wasn't hostile. It was an invitation, a dare to acknowledge the truth simmering between them, a truth that pulsed with the very lifeblood of Blackwood Manor itself. Finally he stirred, a slow, deliberate shift that pulled her further into his orbit. His fingers, long and elegant, reached out not to touch her skin directly, but to trace the delicate curve of her jaw, just above the intricate lace of her collar. It was a feather-like caress, barely there, yet it sent a shiver, exquisite and profound, down her spine, raising goosebumps on her arms despite the warmth of the fire. "You feel it too, Ilara," he murmured, his voice a low, resonant rumble that vibrated through her, a sound meant only for her ears, an intimate confession. It was less a question, more an affirmation, stripping away any pretense she might have clung to, laying bare the burgeoning desire that she had fought so hard to deny. Her gaze flickered from his lips, so tantalizingly close she could feel the faint warmth of his breath, to his eyes, which held hers captive. They were pools of dark desire, reflecting the firelight, burning bright with an ancient hunger that both thrilled and terrified her. "Feel what, Julian?" she managed, her voice a reedy whisper, barely audible even to her own ears. It was a foolish question, a desperate, futile attempt to cling to the last shreds of denial, a fragile shield against the inevitable. He leaned in closer, his scent enveloping her, wood smoke, old leather, and something uniquely his, a wild, untamed essence that spoke of dark forests and hidden depths, of secrets whispered only to the night. His thumb, still hovering near her jaw, brushed lightly against her pulse point, sending a jolt through her, a tremor that started deep within and spread outwards, electrifying every nerve ending. "This," he breathed, his voice a silken thread, his lips almost catching hers. "This undeniable pull, the way the air thrums when we are near, the way your breath catches when I look at you, the way your eyes betray the fire within you, a fire as old as this house, as untamed as the forest that surrounds it." He closed the minuscule distance between them. His lips, soft yet firm, finally met hers. It was a tentative touch at first, a question, a promise, a whisper of a beginning. Then, as if her silent assent had been granted, the kiss deepened. It wasn't forceful, but possessive. A slow, intoxicating exploration that stole her breath and scattered her thoughts. Her own lips parted beneath his, a silent invitation, a surrender she hadn't known she was capable of. A soft moan escaped her throat, a sound she barely recognized as her own, raw and unbidden. She tasted fire and shadow, a hint of something feral and utterly captivating, a taste of secrets whispered in the dark. Her hands, which had been resting idly in her lap, lifted as if of their own accord, finding purchase on his broad shoulders, gripping the rough tweed of his jacket, clinging to him as if he were her only anchor in a world suddenly spinning out of control. The kiss deepened, becoming more insistent, more urgent. He angled his head, allowing for a more thorough exploration, his tongue tracing the seam of her lips, then delving inside, seeking, tasting, conquering. Her senses swam, overwhelmed by the sheer intensity, the dizzying rush of sensation. The world outside them narrowed to this moment. This kiss, this man. The fire roared, a distant counterpoint to the roaring in her ears, the pounding of her heart. He broke the kiss reluctantly, pulling back just enough for their foreheads to touch, their breaths mingling, warm and sweet. His eyes, still dark with desire, searched hers, seeking, questioning, affirming. "Ilara," he whispered, her name a prayer, a plea, a command, imbued with an ancient resonance that seemed to echo through the very foundations of Blackwood Manor. His hands moved, one cupping her cheek, his thumb stroking the soft skin beneath her eye, the other sliding down her neck, tangling in the loose strands of her hair at the nape. He drew her closer still, until her body was flush against his, the soft curves of her breasts pressing against his hard chest. She could feel the rapid beat of his heart mirroring her own, a primal rhythm that pulsed through them both. The rough wool of his jacket scratched deliciously against her silk, a texture play that heightened the exquisite friction between them. "Come with me," he murmured, his voice husky, a low growl that sent shivers of anticipation coursing through her. His eyes never left hers, holding her captive, communicating not a request, but an inevitability, a destiny that had been laid out for them long before she ever set foot in this house. He stood, drawing her up with him. Her legs felt weak, her body pliant and responsive to his every movement, a marionette to his will. He didn't release her hand, but kept her fingers intertwined with his, a tangible connection that grounded her even as her mind soared. He led her away from the crackling hearth, through the dimly lit drawing room. Shadows danced on the walls, elongating their forms, turning them into figures from an old romance, or perhaps a Gothic tale, lost in a timeless embrace. The scent of burning wood and ancient dust followed them, a comforting, familiar perfume. The grand staircase loomed before them, its polished, dark wood gleaming faintly in the reflected firelight from the room they had just left. Each step creaked softly under their combined weight, a rhythmic counterpoint to the frantic pounding of her heart. His grip on her hand was firm, reassuring, yet undeniably possessive, a silent claim she didn't resist. They ascended, the world below them fading into indistinct gloom, the light from the drawing room shrinking to a distant glow. The air grew cooler, carrying the scent of ancient wood, and something else, something indefinable, unique to Blackwood Manor. A hint of petrichor, of old books, of secrets held within stone. Her silk dress rustled softly with each step, a whisper against her thighs, a sound that only added to the hushed intimacy of their ascent. He led her down a long echoing corridor, lined with portraits whose eyes seemed to follow them, their painted visages silent witnesses to their journey. The silence here was different, deeper, broken only by their footsteps and the whisper of her silk skirt against her legs. A lone beam of moonlight, slicing through a tall arched window at the end of the hall, painted a silver path for them, illuminating specks of dust dancing in the air like tiny forgotten spirits. He stopped before a heavy oak door, intricately carved with swirling patterns of leaves and vines, dark and mysterious. He pushed it open, revealing a room bathed in moonlight filtering through tall, arched windows, turning the space into a luminous silver dream. It was a bedchamber, clearly Julian's. The bed, a magnificent four-poster, dominated the room, draped with heavy velvet hangings the color of midnight. A fire had been laid in a smaller hearth, casting a soft, warm glow that banished the chill of the night, making the shadows dance in a gentle ballet. The scent of lavender and something musky, distinctly masculine, filled the air, mingling with the fainter aroma of wood smoke and crisp, cool linen. It was an intoxicating blend, drawing her further into his world. He drew her inside, closing the door softly behind them, a gentle click that severed their connection to the outside world, sealing them within this private sanctuary. Here, within these walls, only they existed. He turned to her, his hands coming to rest on her waist, drawing her into his embrace once more. Her gaze swept over the room, taking in the rich tapestries depicting ancient hunting scenes, the antique furniture, the heavy oak chests, the sense of history and quiet power that permeated everything. But her eyes always returned to him, to the dark intensity of his gaze, the quiet hunger that burned in their depths. "You are even more beautiful in this light," he said, his voice a low purr, a caress in itself, as his fingers began to work at the small pearl buttons of her blouse. Each undoing was a deliberate act, a slow unveiling, a quiet ceremony of desire. Her breath hitched with each button released, a tiny gasp of anticipation, a nervous flutter in her chest. The silk parted, revealing the delicate lace camisole beneath, a whisper of cream against her skin. He didn't rush, his eyes savoring the sight, the slow reveal, a connoisseur appreciating a masterpiece. His fingertips brushed against the warm skin of her collarbone as he gently pushed the fabric from her shoulders. The blouse slipped down her arms, pooling at her feet like a forgotten cloud. She stood before him, clad only in her camisole and skirt, feeling exquisitely vulnerable yet undeniably powerful under his unwavering gaze, a silent testament to his profound effect on her. Her skin felt alive, tingling with every breath she took, every subtle shift of the air. His hands moved to the clasp of her skirt, his touch light, sending shivers through her. The skirt, a heavier silk, whispered to the floor, joining the blouse in a silken puddle. Now, only the delicate lace of her camisole and her silken undergarments remained, a tantalizing barrier. He reached out, his thumbs tracing the lace straps of her camisole, then dipping beneath them to cup her shoulders, his touch warm and firm. He leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to the curve of her neck, just beneath her ear, where her pulse throbbed wildly. "You are exquisite, Ilara," he murmured against her skin, his voice thick with desire, a confession that made her tremble. She shivered, pressing closer to him, her hands finding their way around his neck, her fingers tangling in the soft, dark hair at his nape, pulling him closer. She tilted her head back, offering him more of her throat, her pulse hammering wildly, a drumbeat in the quiet room. He kissed his way along her jawline, to her lips, a deep, consuming kiss that stole her breath, a kiss that tasted of longing and ancient promises. This kiss was different, more urgent, more demanding, a prelude to what was to come, a silent symphony of mounting passion. He lifted her effortlessly into his arms, carrying her towards the grand four-poster bed. She clung to him, her face buried in the crook of his neck, inhaling his intoxicating scent, a blend of clean skin, masculine musk, and the faint lingering aroma of the manor itself. The world tilted, a dizzying whirl of sensation, of soft fabric and hard muscle, of beating hearts and whispered desires. He laid her gently on the silken sheets, the coolness of the fabric a stark contrast to the heat of his body, the heat that radiated from her own skin. He knelt beside the bed, his dark eyes burning into hers, a silent question, a powerful affirmation. He reached out, his fingers tracing the delicate lace of her camisole, then slowly, deliberately he unfastened it. The lace parted, revealing the soft swell of her breasts, barely contained by the wisps of silk. His gaze lingered, a silent adoration, a reverence that made her ache with a desire she had never known. "Beautiful," he breathed, his voice raw with emotion, a tremor running through him. He leaned down, pressing a soft, reverent kiss to the curve of her breast, just above the lace. A jolt of pure pleasure shot through her, a gasp escaping her lips, a sound of pure, unadulterated bliss. He shed his own clothes with an economy of motion, his gaze never leaving hers. A promise in every movement. The firelight played over the lean planes of his body, the broad shoulders, the defined musculature, a testament to strength and grace. He was magnificent, a sculpted god of shadow and desire, an ancient king stepping from the depths of myth. He joined her on the bed, the mattress sinking slightly under his weight. He drew her close, their bodies finally meeting, skin to skin. The warmth of him enveloped her, a comforting, thrilling heat that banished any lingering chill from the manor. His hand found the curve of her hip, drawing her even closer, until there was no space left between them. Until they were a single, intertwined entity. His lips found hers again. A kiss that devoured and consumed, a slow, passionate dance that promised everything, and held nothing back. His leg entwined with hers, a deliberate entanglement, a claim. She arched into him, her body singing with a desire she had never known, a longing that had been dormant for too long, now fully awakened by this man, in this ancient, whispering manner. His fingers trailed a path down her side, igniting a trail of fire in their wake, pausing at her waist, then dipping lower, to the delicate curve of her inner thigh. Her breath hitched, her eyes fluttering closed as she gave herself over to the sensation, to the exquisite torture of his touch. He moved over her, supporting himself on his elbows, his gaze deep and possessive, burning into hers. "Ilara," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, raw with a hunger that mirrored her own. "You're mine tonight, and I, yours." The words were a vow, a surrender, a promise of exquisite pleasure yet to come. She reached up, pulling his head down for another kiss, her lips parting in a silent invitation, her body trembling with anticipation. The whispers of Blackwood Manor seemed to hum around them, no longer a mystery, but a chorus of delighted expectation, a symphony of ancient longing finally fulfilled. The night was young, and their story, only just beginning to unfold its most intimate chapters. His lips claimed hers again, deeper this time, a hungry promise fulfilled. Her fingers, still tangled in his dark hair, tightened, pulling him closer until there was no space left between them, only the delicious press of bodies, the friction of fine fabric, and the intoxicating heat that radiated from him. He tasted of the night, of something wild and ancient, of a desire that mirrored her own, magnified and unleashed. Her own mouth opened beneath his, a soft involuntary gasp escaping her throat as his tongue swept in, a bold, confident dance that sent shivers of pure pleasure through her. The kiss was a journey, a conversation spoken without words, escalating from tender exploration to passionate demand. He angled his head, deepening the embrace, and she met him with equal fervor, her hands sliding from his hair, down the strong column of his neck, across his broad shoulders, feeling the tension and power coiled beneath the exquisite tailoring of his jacket. A soft moan rumbled in his chest, a low guttural sound that vibrated against her, igniting a primal response deep within her core. Her own breath hitched, her lungs suddenly too small to contain the burgeoning sensation. His hands, warm and firm, left her waist, tracing a path upwards, over her ribs, until they found purchase on her back, splaying wide and pressing her even closer, molding her curves to the hard plane of his body. She could feel the rapid beat of his heart against her breast, a frantic drumbeat echoing her own. The air grew thick, heavy with unspoken desires, with the scent of their mingled arousal, his subtle masculine cologne, her own blossoming perfume, the faint, comforting smell of old books and polished wood that permeated Blackwood Manor. He broke the kiss reluctantly, his lips trailing a searing path down her jawline, across the sensitive skin beneath her ear, sending goosebumps prickling over her arms. "You are exquisite," he whispered, his voice a low thrum that resonated through her bones. His breath, warm and moist, feathered against her neck, and she arched into him, a silent plea for more. More beautiful than any dream, any fantasy. Her head fell back, offering him the delicate curve of her throat, and he accepted the invitation without hesitation. His lips brushed, then pressed, then lingered, tasting her skin, sending rivulets of fire through her veins. A soft whimper escaped her, a sound she barely recognized as her own, a testament to the raw, unbridled passion he evoked. His hands continued their exploration, moving lower, tracing the elegant line of her spine, then dipping to cup her hips, pulling her flush against him. She felt the undeniable hardness of his desire, a thrilling, palpable response that made her own legs tremble precariously. "Where shall we go, my love?" he murmured, his voice husky with emotion, his lips still grazing her skin. "To a place where time ceases to exist, where only we, and this moment remain." She couldn't speak, her voice lost somewhere in the torrent of sensations. She simply nodded, her fingers clenching the fabric of his jacket, her body a vessel overflowing with longing. He seemed to understand, for he gently took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, a powerful, reassuring grip that promised both strength and tenderness. He led her from the grand hall, the flickering candlelight casting long, dancing shadows around them, making the ancient manor seem to pulse with a life of its own. Each step was a deliberate act, a slow unwinding of anticipation. They moved through a series of dimly lit corridors, past portraits whose eyes seemed to follow them with knowing gazes, past heavy closed doors that guarded untold stories. The silence of the manor was not empty, but rich, resonant, filled with the echoes of centuries of passion, of lives, lived and loved, within these very walls. It felt as though the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for them, guiding them. The air grew warmer as they ascended a sweeping carved staircase, its banisters smooth and cool beneath her free hand. Her gaze was fixed on his back, on the elegant breadth of his shoulders, the way his dark hair brushed the collar of his jacket. A sense of destiny, profound and undeniable, settled over her. This wasn't just a physical attraction, it was a soul-deep recognition, a feeling of coming home to a place she never knew she'd been searching for. He paused before a heavy oak door, dark wood intricately carved with vines and leaves. With a gentle push, it swung open silently, revealing a room bathed in a soft golden glow. It was a bedroom, undeniably, but unlike any she had ever seen. The air within was subtly perfumed with lavender, and something else. Something musky, and uniquely hung. A grand four-poster bed dominated the center, draped in rich, dark fabrics that seemed to drink the light, promising an abyss of comfort and intimacy. Heavy velvet curtains framed tall windows, keeping the night at bay, creating a sanctuary. A fire crackled softly in a massive stone hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls, painting the room in hues of amber and rose. "Welcome," he said, his voice soft, almost reverent, as he drew her inside. The door clicked shut behind them, sealing them in their private world. Her eyes swept around the room, taking in the antique furnishings, the subtle gleam of polished brass, the heavy tapestry hanging on one wall depicting a moonlit forest. But all of it faded into the periphery as her gaze returned to him. He stood before her, bathed in the firelight, his eyes dark and intense, a silent question in their depths. He reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek, his thumb tracing the delicate curve of her jaw. "You are real," he whispered, a hint of wonder in his voice. "More real than any dream, any longing I have ever known." She leaned into his touch, her heart aching with a tenderness that surprised her. "And you," she replied, her voice a little shaky, "are everything I never knew I was missing." He smiled then, a slow, breathtaking unfolding of warmth that banished any remaining shadows from her heart. It was a smile that promised devotion, passion, and an understanding that transcended words. He lowered his head, not to kiss her, but to press his forehead against hers, their breaths mingling, their eyes locked in an intimate gaze. "Let me," he murmured, his voice a silken caress, as his fingers went to the buttons of her dress. Each touch was deliberate, sending a fresh wave of anticipation through her. Her gown, a delicate silk, had seemed light and ethereal moments ago, but now it felt like a heavy barrier, a testament to the world they were leaving behind. He unfastened the tiny buttons one by one, his movements slow and reverent, his eyes never leaving hers. Her breath hitched with each release, the fabric loosening, revealing glimpses of the skin beneath. His touch was feather-light, barely there, yet it ignited a burning trail wherever it lingered. When the last button was undone, he paused, his gaze dropping to the exposed skin of her collarbone, then lower, to the faint swell of her breasts beneath the silk. "You are a vision," he breathed, his voice thick with emotion. He reached for the shoulders of her dress, gently easing them down her arms. The silk slid away like a second skin, pooling at her feet in a shimmering cascade. She stood before him in her delicate lace underthings, the firelight painting her skin in hues of gold and shadow. A blush bloomed on her cheeks, a shy response to his intense gaze, but there was no shame, only a burgeoning confidence in his admiration. He reached out, his fingertips tracing the lace strap of her camisole, then following the curve of her shoulder. "Perfect," he whispered, his eyes dark with desire. His hands then found the ribbon of her camisole, untying it with practiced ease. The delicate fabric fell away, revealing the soft curves of her breasts, barely contained by the lace cups of her bra. Her breath caught in her throat as his gaze lingered, a silent appreciation that felt like a warm embrace. "May I?" he asked, his voice a low rumble, his eyes seeking her permission. She nodded, unable to speak, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. His fingers, surprisingly deft, unhooked her bra from the front. The lace parted, and her breasts spilled forth, full and soft, catching the firelight. A wave of vulnerability, swiftly followed by exhilarating release, washed over her. His eyes, dark and intense, devoured the sight, and a slow, primal groan escaped his lips. He reached out, his hands cupping her, his thumbs brushing over her sensitive nipples, which hardened instantly in response. A soft gasp escaped her, and she instinctively arched into his touch, a silent plea for more. His touch was exquisite, firm yet gentle, sending ripples of pure pleasure through her entire being. He leaned down, his lips brushing against the soft skin of her décolletage, then lower, tasting the warmth of her breast, circling her nipple with the tip of his tongue before taking her fully into his mouth. A moan tore from her throat, raw and uninhibited. She tangled her fingers in his hair again, holding him close, pressing him to her. His suckling was deep, rhythmic, a primal satisfaction that echoed in her very core, sending shockwaves of ecstasy through her. He alternated between her breasts, teasing, tasting, drawing out every exquisite sensation until her knees threatened to buckle. "My turn," she whispered, her voice hoarse with desire, as he finally lifted his head, his eyes burning with a dark, triumphant fire. She reached for the buttons of his vest, her fingers fumbling slightly in her eagerness. He chuckled softly, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated against her. "Impatient, are we, my love?" he teased, but there was no judgment in his voice, only delight. He covered her hands with his, guiding them, helping her unfasten the buttons. The vest came off first, revealing the crisp white linen of his shirt. Then, with a practiced flick, he unbuttoned his cuffs, allowing her to take over the rest. Her fingers trembled as she unfastened each button of his shirt, her gaze fixed on the expanse of his chest that slowly revealed itself. Dark, fine hair feathered across his skin, leading down to the taut line of his abdomen. She traced the line of his collarbone with a tentative finger, then ran her palm over the hard plane of his chest, feeling the warmth of his skin, the powerful beat of his heart beneath her touch. He was solid, muscular, a testament to strength and power, yet his skin was surprisingly soft beneath her fingertips. He shrugged out of his shirt, letting it fall to the floor, joining her dress in a silken puddle. Now, he stood before her, magnificent and bare-chested, his eyes blazing with a hunger that mirrored her own. She reached up, her hands spanning his shoulders, feeling the defined muscles beneath her palms. Then, emboldened, she let her hands trail lower, over his chest, feeling the subtle texture of his hair, the warmth of his skin, the undeniable power that hummed beneath the surface. He watched her, his expression a mixture of intense desire and profound satisfaction, allowing her to explore. Her hands drifted lower, tracing the lean line of his waist, dipping into the slight hollows of his hips. The dark trousers he wore seemed to mock her, a final barrier. "Take them off," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a raw plea. He smiled, a slow, sensual curve of his lips. "As you wish, my love." With a languid grace that belied the urgency in his eyes, he unfastened his trousers, the sound of the buckle a sharp click in the quiet room. He stepped out of them, letting them fall to the floor with a soft rustle, revealing dark silk boxers that clung to the powerful planes of his thighs. Her breath hitched as she took in the full measure of him, his body a masterpiece of sculpted muscle and raw masculinity. Now, only the last vestiges of clothing remained. She felt a shiver of delicious anticipation as he reached for the waistband of her panties, his fingers brushing against her inner thigh. The touch was electric, sending a jolt of fire through her core. With a slow, deliberate movement, he peeled them down, his eyes never leaving hers, making sure she was ready for each revelation. They slid down her legs, joining the growing pile of clothes on the floor. She stood before him, completely bare, feeling utterly exposed yet exhilaratingly free. The firelight played over her skin, painting her in a warm, inviting glow. He took a step closer, his eyes lingering on every curve, every secret hollow. "Beautiful," he breathed, his voice rough with emotion. "Utterly, breathtakingly beautiful." He reached for her, his hands settling on her waist, drawing her into his embrace. Her naked skin met his, a gasp escaping her lips as the delicious warmth of his body enveloped her. His skin was smooth, hot, and utterly intoxicating. She pressed herself against him, feeling the hard length of his desire against her belly, a thrilling promise of what was to come. His lips found hers again, a kiss that was both tender and ravenous, a deep plunge into the core of their shared passion. Her arms wrapped around his neck, her fingers tangling in his damp hair as she met his intensity with equal fire. The world outside the room, outside their embrace, ceased to exist. There was only the heat of their bodies, the taste of his mouth, the pounding of their hearts, and the exquisite friction of skin against skin. He lifted her effortlessly into his arms, a gasp of surprise and delight escaping her. She clung to him, her legs wrapping instinctively around his waist, her face buried in the crook of his neck, inhaling his intoxicating scent. He carried her to the bed, the soft mattress yielding beneath them as he gently laid her down. The heavy drapes of the four-poster bed seemed to close around them, creating a private haven, a world built for two. He hovered over her, his dark eyes burning into hers, a silent question, a silent promise. She reached up, her fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw, pulling him down for another kiss. He descended, his lips claiming hers with a soft urgency. His body pressing against hers, the weight of him a comforting, thrilling pressure. He moved slowly, deliberately, his hips grinding gently against hers, a sensual rhythm that made her moan. Her legs parted, inviting him closer, her body aching with a desperate need for him. His hand found its way between her thighs, his fingers brushing against the moist heat of her sex, sending a shockwave of pleasure through her. She arched into his touch, her breath catching in her throat. His touch was knowing, skillful, teasing, circling, then dipping, finding her most sensitive point. She cried out softly, her body trembling, her hips lifting instinctively, seeking more. He responded, his fingers delving deeper, exploring, eliciting gasps and moans that filled the quiet room. Her mind spun, lost in a haze of pure sensation, her body humming with an electric current. "You're ready for me," he whispered, his voice a low, rough growl against her ear. More than ready, my love. He shifted, rising slightly, his eyes still locked with hers, a burning intensity that promised both ecstasy and devotion. He positioned himself between her legs, the hard length of him pressing against her entrance, a hot, insistent demand. She looked up at him, her eyes wide, filled with a mixture of anticipation and a thrilling, beautiful fear. "Look at me," he commanded softly, his gaze never wavering. "Be with me." She nodded, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her body aching with an almost unbearable longing. He leaned down, brushing his lips against hers one last time, a tender prelude to the storm. Then with a slow, deliberate motion, he pushed, entering her. A sharp gasp tore from her throat, a mixture of pain and exquisite pleasure as her body stretched, adjusted, and then enveloped him. He paused, allowing her to acclimate, his eyes searching hers for any sign of discomfort. She met his gaze, her own eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of overwhelming emotion, of a profound sense of completeness. "You are mine," he whispered, his voice thick with triumph and tenderness. "And I, yours." He began to move, slowly at first, a gentle rocking motion that built in intensity. Each thrust was deliberate, powerful, filling her completely. She wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him closer, wanting to feel every inch of him, wanting to be utterly consumed. Their bodies moved in an ancient rhythm, a dance as old as time itself, two halves finally made whole. The firelight flickered, casting their intertwined shadows on the walls, a silent testament to their passionate union. Blackwood Manor hummed around them, no longer just a house, but a living, breathing entity, witnessing and celebrating their love, their story unfolding in the most intimate of chapters, with so much more yet to come. The crescendo faded into a sustained hum, a vibration that resonated deep within Ilara's bones, mirroring the thrum of her own heart. Julian's breath, warm against her ear, was a soft lullaby, and his arms, strong and possessive, held her close as their bodies slowly, deliciously, disentangled. Not fully, never fully. Their legs remained entwined, their chests pressed together, the residual heat a comforting blanket against the cool night air that now drifted through the slightly ajar window. A sigh, long and contented, escaped her lips, and she felt Julian's chest rumble beneath her. He kissed the top of her head, a tender, possessive gesture that made her heart swell. The world outside the flickering firelight seemed to recede, leaving only the two of them, suspended in a pocket of pure bliss. She could feel the steady beat of his heart against her own, a rhythm she felt destined to find. "Ilara," he murmured, his voice husky, laced with a wonder that mirrored her own. He didn't need to say more. The single word, her name, was a universe of meaning, of discovery, of passion, of a connection that transcended the physical. She tilted her head back, meeting his gaze. His eyes, pools of dark desire just moments ago, were now softened, filled with a deep, quiet tenderness that made her breath catch. A faint smile played on his lips, a secret shared between them. She reached up, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw, feeling the slight stubble that hinted at the ruggedness beneath his cultivated charm. "Julian?" she whispered back, the name feeling sacred on her tongue. Her fingers tangled in his dark hair, pulling him gently closer until their foreheads rested against each other. The scent of him, musk, wood smoke, and something uniquely Julian, filled her senses, intoxicating and grounding all at once. They lay like that for a long time, listening to the soft crackle of the fire, the distant hoot of an owl, and the quiet whisper of the manor itself. Blackwood, once a place of mystery and a hint of melancholy, now felt like a warm, protective embrace, a silent witness to their unfolding story. It was as if the ancient walls had absorbed their passion, infusing the very air with a sense of destiny fulfilled. Eventually Julian stirred, shifting just enough to pull the plush velvet duvet over their bare bodies, cocooning them in warmth. He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips, a slow, lingering kiss that promised endless mornings and countless nights. "Sleep, my love," he murmured, his voice a balm to her soul. She nestled closer, her head on his shoulder, his arm a secure weight around her. The fire began to dwindle, casting longer, softer shadows, until finally, only the dying embers glowed, painting their slumbering forms in hues of orange and red. Ilara drifted off, a profound sense of peace settling over her, a feeling of finally being home. The morning light, filtered through the heavy drapes, was a gentle awakening. Ilara stretched, her muscles pleasantly sore, her body humming with a deep contentment she'd never known. She opened her eyes to find Julian watching her, propped up on one elbow, a soft smile gracing his lips. His dark hair was tousled, his eyes crinkled at the corners with amusement, and something deeper. "Good morning," he said, his voice a low, warm rumble that sent a shiver down her spine. "Morning," she replied, her own voice still thick with sleep and emotion. She felt utterly exposed, yet entirely at ease, bathed in the warmth of his gaze. There was no awkwardness, no regret, only a profound sense of rightness. He reached out, his fingers tracing the curve of her cheek, then down her neck to her collarbone. "You look incandescent," he whispered, his eyes lingering on her face, as if memorizing every detail. A blush crept up her neck, but it was a blush of pleasure, not embarrassment. She reached for him, her hand finding his, intertwining their fingers. "And you, Julian Blackwood, look rather magnificent yourself." He chuckled, a rich, resonant sound that filled the room. "Magnificent! I'll take it." He leaned in, kissing her softly, chastely, a promise of more to come. "Hungry?" "Starved," she admitted, a sudden pang in her stomach reminding her of how long it had been since she'd eaten. "Stay right there," he commanded, already throwing back the covers and rising. Ilara watched him, unashamedly admiring the lean, powerful lines of his body, as he moved with an easy grace towards the dressing room. He quickly returned, pulling on a pair of dark trousers, leaving his chest bare. "I'll be back," he promised, offering her a wink before disappearing. Ilara lay amidst the rumpled sheets, the scent of him still clinging to the pillows, and allowed herself to truly process the night. It hadn't been just passion, it had been an unveiling, a merging of souls that left her feeling both vulnerable and incredibly strong. She realized, with a startling clarity, that she was falling irrevocably, deeply in love with Julian Blackwood. The realization didn't bring fear, but an exhilarating sense of purpose. Minutes later, Julian returned, balancing a tray laden with coffee, freshly squeezed orange juice, warm croissants, and a bowl of ripe berries. The aroma alone was heavenly. He set it carefully on the bedside table before sliding back into bed beside her, propping pillows behind his back. "Room service at Blackwood Manor is rather exclusive," he teased, handing her a steaming mug of coffee. They ate in comfortable silence, punctuated by appreciative murmurs and shared smiles. Each bite felt infused with the joy of their shared morning, a simple act transformed into a profound communion. Ilara watched the morning light slowly seep into the room, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, and realized the beauty of Blackwood was not just in its grandeur, but in the quiet intimacy it fostered. "We should explore today," Ilara suggested, once the last croissant crumb had been devoured. "Really explore the manor and the grounds." Julian's eyes lit up. "I'd like that. There's so much to Blackwood that even I haven't truly appreciated until now. It always felt like a burden, a responsibility. Now," he paused, his gaze softening as it met hers. "Now it feels like a home waiting to be filled." They dressed, lingering over each touch, each glance, the air between them still thick with unspoken promises. Julian lent her an old, soft flannel shirt of his, the sleeves too long but smelling wonderfully of him, and a pair of sturdy walking boots from a collection he kept for guests. She felt a comfortable ease in his clothes, as if she were already part of his world. Hand in hand, they began their exploration. Julian led her through corridors she hadn't yet seen, revealing hidden nooks and grand spaces with the pride of someone finally sharing his most cherished secret. They discovered a vast library, its shelves groaning with ancient tomes, the air thick with the scent of aged paper and leather. Julian recounted stories of his ancestors, their passions and their follies, as Ilara ran her fingers over the spines of books, imagining generations of Blackwoods seeking solace and knowledge within these walls. They found a music room with a grand piano, its keys yellowed with age, and Julian, to Ilara's delight, sat down and played a hauntingly beautiful melody that filled the room with a melancholic elegance. His fingers danced over the keys, each note a testament to a hidden talent, a depth she was only just beginning to uncover. "I didn't know you played," she whispered, leaning against the piano, utterly captivated. He smiled, a shy, almost vulnerable expression. "It was my mother's. She taught me. After she left, I rarely touched it. It hurt too much." Ilara's heart ached for the boy he must have been, burdened by loss in this grand, silent house. She reached out, placing her hand gently over his on the keys. "Thank you for sharing that with me." He turned to her, his eyes serious. "Thank you for being here, Ilara. You've brought light back into these rooms and into me." From the manor they ventured outside. The autumn air was crisp and invigorating, carrying the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. Julian led her through sprawling gardens, now wild and overgrown but hinting at past glory, to a small hidden lake shrouded by weeping willows. The reflections of the trees shimmered on the still water, creating an ethereal landscape. "My favorite spot," Julian confessed, his voice softer than before. "I used to come here when I was a boy, to escape." Ilara sat beside him on a moss-covered stone bench, her shoulder brushing his. "What were you escaping?" He sighed, a long, deep breath. "Loneliness, mostly. My father was a good man, but distant. After my mother, it was just us, and this house. It felt enormous, sometimes oppressive. I'd spend hours here imagining other worlds, other lives." He paused, picking up a smooth, flat stone and skipping it across the water. "I always imagined sharing it with someone who understood, someone who made it feel less like a sanctuary from the world and more like a part of it." He turned to her, his gaze intense. "Someone like you." Her heart swelled with a mixture of tenderness and joy. This was the Julian she was falling for. The one who carried a quiet vulnerability beneath his confident exterior. The one who dreamed of shared futures in forgotten gardens. "And what about you, Ilara?" he asked gently. "What did you escape? Or what did you long for?" She looked out at the shimmering lake, considering. "I suppose I always longed for a place to truly belong. My life has been transient, moving from place to place, always searching for something I couldn't quite name. A sense of permanence, perhaps. A home that felt like it was woven into my very soul, not just a temporary address." She looked back at him, a small, hopeful smile on her lips. "I think I've found it, Julian. Here, with you." He reached for her, pulling her into a tight embrace. The warmth of his body, the strength of his arms, the scent of him, it all felt like an anchor in a tumultuous sea. "You have," he whispered into her hair. "You absolutely have." They spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the grounds, discovering hidden pathways, old stone walls, and a small crumbling folly that Julian promised they would restore together. The promise hung in the air, a gentle affirmation of a shared future. As dusk began to settle, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, they made their way back to the manor. The imposing silhouette of Blackwood against the twilight sky no longer felt daunting, but welcoming, a beacon of warmth and love. The scent of wood smoke curled from the chimneys, hinting at the hearth fires within. Julian led her to the grand dining room, a space Ilara had only glimpsed. A fire crackled in the enormous fireplace, and a long polished mahogany table was set for two, gleaming silver catching the firelight. Candles flickered, casting a soft, romantic glow. "I took the liberty of arranging a simple supper," Julian said, a slight nervousness in his voice. "I hope you don't mind the formality." "It's perfect," she breathed, genuinely touched by his thoughtfulness. The meal, simple but exquisite, was prepared by Mrs. Gable, the kindly housekeeper Julian had mentioned, who discreetly placed the dishes on the sideboard before retreating. They ate slowly, savoring not just the food, but the quiet intimacy of the moment, the feeling of building a new tradition. Over dessert, a rich chocolate mousse, Julian reached across the table, taking her hand. His thumb stroked her knuckles gently. "Elara," he began, his voice serious, his gaze unwavering. "What we found last night, what we're building today, it feels like everything I've ever longed for, without even knowing it. You are everything I never knew I needed." Her heart fluttered, a wild bird trapped in her chest. She squeezed his hand, unable to speak, her eyes mirroring the depth of her emotion. "I know it's fast," he continued, a slight tremor in his voice. "But I feel it in my bones, in the very air of this house. This isn't just a fleeting moment, Elara. This is destiny. I want to build a life with you here, in Blackwood, to fill these rooms with laughter, with love, with shared dreams. To make it our home, truly. Make it our home, truly." He paused, taking a deep breath. "Elara, I'm falling in love with you, and I want to know, do you feel it too?" Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the candlelight. The words, so long unspoken, so deeply felt, resonated with every fiber of her being. She didn't hesitate. "Yes, Julian," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Oh yes, I'm falling in love with you too. More than I ever thought possible." A profound relief washed over his face, replaced by a radiant smile that lit up his eyes. He rose from his chair, pulling her up with him, and wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly. She buried her face in his shoulder, inhaling his familiar, comforting scent, feeling the strong beat of his heart against her cheek. This was it. This was everything. Later, in the quiet sanctuary of his, now their bedroom, the fire once again casting its warm, inviting glow, they found each other again. This time, there was no urgency, no frantic discovery. There was a knowing tenderness, a gentle exploration of familiar terrain, made new by the depth of their shared feelings. They moved with a languid grace, each touch, each kiss, a silent testament to their love, a whispered promise of forever. Julian's hands traced the curves of her body with a reverence that brought fresh shivers to her skin. His lips, soft and seeking, explored every inch of her, igniting a slow, burning fire that consumed her from the inside out. Elara responded with an uninhibited passion, her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer, closer still, until there was no space left between them. Only the delicious friction of skin, heart against heart. Their lovemaking was a dance of intimacy and surrender, a symphony of sighs and whispers, of soft moans and shared breaths. It was a profound conversation without words, a language spoken by bodies that understood each other with an ancient, innate wisdom. The firelight flickered, painting their entwined forms in shades of gold and amber, their shadows dancing on the walls, a living tapestry of their devotion. As they lay in the aftermath, bodies still humming, minds filled with a quiet euphoria, Julian pulled her close, kissing her hair. "My Elara," he murmured, his voice heavy with contentment. "My love." She felt utterly cherished, utterly complete. Blackwood Manor, once a silent sentinel to his solitude, now hummed with their combined energy, a living, breathing entity witnessing their love story unfold, chapter by exquisite chapter. The future stretched before them, not as an intimidating unknown, but as a beautiful open book, waiting for them to fill its pages with a lifetime of shared moments, of passion, of quiet companionship, and of a love that had finally found its true, eternal home within its ancient walls. The fire continued to glow, casting a steady, unwavering light, a symbol of the enduring flame that now burned brightly between them, destined to illuminate their path forward, together, forever.